Chaim. So, in the early 1990s, one of the great and most well-known medical research exercises, which was known as the nun study, took place. Today, the results of this study are widely known, but at that time it was very revolutionary. About 700 American nuns were agreed to participate in this study. You see, they wanted, in general, when you make a medical study, you have to find a lot of people to participate. And one of the challenges is that all the people in the study have different lifestyles, they have different families, they have different diets, they have different schedules, and there are so many factors they need to take into account when you do a study. But here they had a great opportunity. They had 700 nuns, all about the same age. They were all elderly, over 75 years old. They all had the exact same schedule, the exact same lifestyle, exact same diet almost. And so this was a great opportunity to test the connection between a person's emotions and his physical health. And they had all of these nuns 60 years earlier, in the 1930s, when they had joined the convent. They had to each write down like an autobiography. So they have to write about their life and why they're joining, and they have to write all about themselves. So they had all of these works that the nuns had written 60 years earlier, and they now wanted to test the connection between what they wrote about themselves 60 years earlier and how that affects their current health. And they grouped their autobiographies based on different emotions and different feelings that they had. And they found something which at the time was pretty revolutionary, but today is something that everybody knows, that positive emotions, specifically they looked at emotions such as contentment, gratitude, happiness, love, and hope, have a tremendous impact on a person's physical health. Some the nuns who had experienced those emotions and who had written about those emotions were much more likely to be alive and healthy 60 years later. And it was to such a great degree that they estimated it might add about 7 years to a person's life, a positive outlook on life. Right? Someone who is happy and feels gratitude is likely to live 7 years longer than someone who complains all day. And of course, this sparked many other further research, and today there are hundreds of studies that look into it. And really, that's in a way one of the themes of this week's Parsha. Right? The Jews are traveling 40 years through the desert, and they have to decide what's their outlook on life. Are they going to sit and complain the whole time, or are they going to be happy? So the Parsha starts off, speaks about the lighting of the menorah. Right? Hashem says to Aaron that you should light the menorah, and in a Medrash and Rashi, everybody asks, what is this coming in over here? Right? We spoke about the menorah earlier, and in Parshas Tetzaveh, we discussed it in a few different places. And here we're talking about the dedication of the Mishkan. Why is the menorah suddenly pop in over here? So Rashi says that we just learned that the leaders of the 12 tribes brought gifts, brought sacrifices when they dedicated the Mishkan. And all 12 tribes brought it, except for the tribe of Levi. Right? Aaron, the leader of the tribe of Levi, was very upset. His tribe didn't get to bring a gift to Hashem. They didn't get to bring sacrifices. So he was a little upset about this. So Hashem appeared to Aaron, and he says to him that you are going to get something even greater. You're going to get to light the menorah. You're going to be the Kohen Gadol. You're going to get to light the menorah. It's even greater than the sacrifices that the other leaders are going to bring. And the obvious question is, why pick out the menorah? There are many different tasks that a Kohen Gadol does. He brings sacrifices every day, right? He brings the Ketoris, there's so many jobs that he has to do. He can go into the Holy of Holies. Why do we single out the menorah? What's so special about it? So the Gemara in Ksubais, on Kufay and Beis, brings down many stories, all on the same theme. I'm just going to bring down a few of them. The Gemara says that Shmuel, the great Rabbi Shmuel, was once crossing a river, and he had to get onto a little boat to cross over the river. And it was a very shaky boat, And this guy who was standing there approached him and he said, "Let me help you on." He stretched out his hand and he held Shmuel's hand as Shmuel got onto the boat. Shmuel said, "Thank you very much. But by the way, I don't recognize you. What are you doing here? What are you doing in this area?" And he said, "Oh, I have a court case in your court tomorrow." So Shmuel says, "Well, very, very sorry, but I can't be a judge in your case. After you did me such a big favor, you helped me get on the boat. You can't be a judge in your case." The Gemara continues, Meimar was once sitting and studying or sitting in court, and it seems like there was a chicken coop nearby, and the wind blew some feathers, and a feather flew into the courthouse and landed on Meimar's head. Right? And this man who's standing there runs over and he removes the feather from Meimar's head. And Meimar's like, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I'm next in line for the court." And Meimer says, "I'm sorry, you have to go to a different judge. I can't judge your case. You removed a feather from my head. I'm biased in your case." Right? The Gemara continues. Mar Ukva was once studying and somebody walked by and spit on the ground in front of him. So another person came running over to cover the spit, that shouldn't be visible when he's sitting and learning. So Mar Ukva asked him, "What do you, it's nice to meet you. Thank you very much. Where are you from? What are you doing here?" He said, "I came here to have a court case scheduled tomorrow by you're based in." And again, he said, "I'm so sorry, but I can't judge your case. You have to find a different judge." Right? Now, it seems a little strange. We're talking about great rabbis who, have very different priorities than what we do. They understand what's really important in life. And, it's a little strange that these great rabbis are going to be biased because somebody removed a feather from your head. Right? Are you trying to tell me that a Meimar is not going to be able to judge a case, right? To objectively judge a case because one of the participants removed a feather from his head a few hours earlier, right? Or Shmuel was not able to be objective if somebody helped him get on the boat. That's really so important to them. Now, of course, there are many. We know how we can learn from this how great personal bias is. But we're talking here about great rabbis. We're not talking about simple people. We're talking about great rabbis. They couldn't overcome this bias. They couldn't objectively judge a case, even though the guy removed a feather from his head or covered up some spit that was in front of him. Well, we're talking about giants, Torah giants, tzaddikim. So Rabbi Yaakov Orenstein was a teacher in London during the war, and he once saw in the newspaper a list that the Red Cross had published of Jews who had been displaced during the war and had to go into Russia. And the Red Cross was trying to help them out. And Rabbi Orenstein looked at the list, and he saw that one of the names on the list was Wiedenfeld. It didn't say a first name, but he thought this might be it, the great Shabina Rov, Rabbi Doiv Wiedenfeld. Figured he'll send him a gift, send him some food. He doesn't know if it's the right guy, but worst comes to worst, another Jew will get food, right? It's not. So he sends off some food. 5 years later, in the meantime, the Shabina Rav had been in Russia. I don't know exactly how he made it to Israel. It was a very difficult 5 years. 5 years later, Rabbi Orenstein gets a telegram. The telegram telegram's from Israel, and it says, "I just arrived in Haifa, and I'm finally able to thank you for the food you sent me 5 years ago." Right? This is what he was thinking about during the 5 years. When am I going to be able to say thank you to somebody who sent me food? Right? This is the Shabina Rav. And we find this in general when we look at our tzaddikim. We find that the greater the person is, the greater their sense of gratitude is. Right? Rabbi Elio Dessler, when he came to America in 1948, so he met up with his son Nachum, who had gone. He was in London, but he had gone to the yeshiva in Kelm before the war, and the whole yeshiva had to escape to the Far East. They went through Japan, and eventually they made it to America. And his father hadn't seen him for many years. When he finally arrived in America, he saw his son, and he asked him, he wanted to know his whole story, and he asked him who helped him get here, who helped him out. He was all alone for so many years, and he mentioned a few people who helped him, and one of them was Rabbi Eliezer Silver, right? Who was the head of Agudas Yisrael, who helped many people who needed help getting to America, and he was then a rabbi in Cincinnati. So when Rabbi Dessler heard this, he said, we got to go tell him thank you. So he said, okay, I have his number. Should we call him? It's a long-distance phone call. We'll make a phone call. He says, thank him over the phone? Thank him over the phone? We got to go thank him in person. It's a 9-hour train ride. We're going, right? So they bought tickets. They traveled down to Cincinnati. They come there 5 o'clock in the morning. They come to Rabbi Silver's house as he's going to shul. They go to shul with him, and afterwards they come to his house after davening. He invites them for breakfast, and Rabbi Silver says, "Rabbi Dessler, it's so nice that you came here. What brings you here to Cincinnati?" And he says, I traveled here to thank you. I traveled here to thank you for helping my son. I wanted to thank you for all the help you gave to my son. Okay, so he thinks about it for a minute, and he says, can you tell me what really brought you here? Right? What do you need? Obviously you need something, right? How can I help you out? So he says, I already told you, I came here to thank you for helping my son. I know, but what are you really here for? So he says, no, really, it's the only reason I'm here. I'm going back, and I have a train ticket going back soon. It's the only reason I'm here, right? He was shocked. He'd never seen such a thing, right? But this is really what we find. We find this again and again in our history. We find that the greater our leaders were, the greater their sense of gratitude and akaras hatayv was. And this is really, we find this. This is really what the Gemara is telling us. The Gemara is not saying that Ameimar was so happy that a feather was removed from his head and he couldn't be objective. No. The Gemara was telling us that Ameimar was so great. Shmuel, Amar Ukva, and Ameimar was so great that if somebody removed a feather from their head, somebody covered up some spit that was in front of them, somebody held their hand when they got on the boat, they felt such a sense of gratitude that there was no way they could ever judge this person objectively. They were inherently biased because they had such a gratitude for even the smallest thing. Right? And we find this the same idea by Moshe Rabbeinu, right? When Hashem tells Moshe to hit the water and turn it into blood, right? It's time to turn the water into blood. Moshe turns to Aaron and he says, Aaron, you hit the water and turn it into blood. I can't do it. Why? Because 80 years ago, my mother put me in a basket on the water. So the water saved my life. I can't hit the water. Again, it's time to hit the water for frogs. Again, he says, I can't hit the water.
If it was whiskey, he would be able to. He was bringing it up a level.
Finally, it's time to turn the dust of Egypt into lice. And Moshe says, I can't do it. Why not? Because, many years ago, I killed this Egyptian and I had to bury him in the earth to save myself. Now, it's a little bit strange, right? First of all, we're talking here about a plague that's going to free the Jewish people from Egypt, right? And Moshe is worried about the earth that doesn't have thoughts, it doesn't have feelings. It didn't choose to help him. The earth didn't do anything to help him, and the water didn't do anything to help him. They're inanimate objects, right? And not only that, the dust didn't really help him very much. I mean, the next day, Dasan and Aviram ran to Pari to tell him what Moshe did, right? So it may have delayed, things for a day. That's pretty much it. But Moshe had such a sense of gratitude that 80 years later, he was still thinking that his basket was in the water. He couldn't bring himself to hit the water, right? And we find this theme again and again. Rabbi Yisrael Gustman was the Rosh Yeshiva in the Netzach Yisrael Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. So outside of the yeshiva, there was a little garden. And every day, he would go out to the garden and he would water the plants. And he would actually bring a shovel sometimes to do some garden work. And the students in the yeshiva were a little surprised. This is not really the job of a Rosh Yeshiva. Right, this is, we have a garden and we can get, somebody to take care of it. Why is the Rosh Yeshiva so involved? So one of the Bachram said, no, I can take care of it. I can water the plants. So he said, Chas v'shalom, I have to show my gratitude. What do you mean your gratitude? So he said, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you the story. He says, many years ago, before the war, I was I studied by Chaim Oizer Godzinski. And one day we were walking outside, and we walked up into the nearby woods, and Chaim Oizer started to show me different plants. And he started to show me different plants, wild plants that are edible. And I didn't understand, why is he teaching me this? Why is it so important? But unfortunately, a short time later, when I had to flee Vilna and run into the woods when the Nazis came, I realized why he taught me this. And for a long time, I survived off these wild plants in the woods. And now that Hashem saved me, brought me to Eretz Yisrael, I feel a sense of gratitude. I want to show my appreciation. That's why I take care of these plants. Right? Obviously, these plants are not aware. They didn't do anything. There was no conscious decision to help him. But he felt. This is the sense of gratitude that he felt. Rab Elia Lapian was Rosh Yeshiva in the Eitz Chaim, the Yeshiva Eitz Chaim, for many years. Later, he moved to Israel. He became the Mashgiach in the Knesset Chizkiyahu Yeshiva, and he passed away in I think 1970. But there are not many, even though he was around in 1970, we don't have many pictures of him, of Rabbi Elia Lapian. But there's one very well-known picture that we have. The picture is Rabbi Elia Lapian feeding milk to a cat. Right? What was the story? So the story was that there was the yeshiva had a mice infestation. And the Bachrim weren't happy. The mice are eating up all their stuff. So they went out and they found a cat. They brought it back to yeshiva, and the cat was supposed to handle the mice, and it did a great job. Took care of all the mice. The problem was once the mice were gone, the Bachrim forgot about it. So the cat's wandering around the yeshiva looking for mice, and Rabbi Elia Lapian sees the cat, and he asks what's going on, and they tell him, we took care of the mice. And what's it eating now? I don't know, whatever. And he said that the cat that removed the mice from our yeshiva, we have to show appreciation. So he would go every day to bring it some milk. And this is really the challenge that the Jewish people had in this week's Torah portion. Hashem did so much for the Jewish people. And the Jewish people, unfortunately, a lot of them had a difficult time showing their appreciation and showing their gratitude. Because all of us in our lives, we have many, many blessings that are given to us in our lives. But we all have little problems, right? And they chose to focus on the small little issues. Right? The small little problems in their life. Right? Hashem could give them man from heaven and they'll complain. Right? Because it doesn't taste like cucumbers or old fish or whatever. I don't know. Garlic, whatever the man didn't taste melons. Like. Right? Melons. That's what they're focused on. Right? The man, it tastes like anything you want. Right? You want pizza, you get pizza. Right? If it's a good steak, you can get a good steak. But it doesn't taste like onions and there's no cucumbers and there's no melons. And that's what's bothering them, right? And really, our job, the way we, when it comes to our relationship with Hashem, there's so much positive that we can focus on. This is true with our relationship with other people, and it's also true with our relationship with Hashem, right? When Rabbi Schwab was old, because he became older. So he eventually was no longer able to walk, and it came to a point that the doctor told him that he has to be taken around in a wheelchair. And his grandson was taking him around that day, and he was expecting to find his grandfather all upset. He's no longer able to walk. He's being pushed around in a wheelchair, and he comes and his grandfather is going around all day with a big smile on his face. He's so happy. So at the end of the day, his grandson asked him, Zaidi, of course, everything Hashem does is for a good reason, and we have to accept everything. We have to accept Hashem's decrees, but you're so happy today? The day that the doctor tells you have to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair? And so he smiled at him, and he says, let me ask you something, he said. If somebody came to you and gave you $10 million, right, in those days it was $10 million was a lot, so let's upgrade it. Somebody comes to you today and gives you $10 billion. He says you can have it and do whatever you want with it. You can spend, you can invest it, you can, right? And he gives it to you. And you invest the money, you buy everything you need. And 50 years go by. After 50 years, the same guy comes back to you, and he says, "Can you give me back? Could you give me back? I don't know, $10 million, right? By this time, your 10 billion had turned into who knows how much, right? You'll happily give it to him. You won't be upset. Not only won't you be angry, you'll be happy that you have a bit of an opportunity to give back, right? So Hashem gave me so much in life. Hashem gave me a wonderful family, wife, children, good health. He gave me the ability to learn Torah, to teach Torah to so many students. And for so many years, I've lived such a good and happy life. And finally now, in my old age, Hashem comes along and He says, you could still have everything. You could still have all the Torah you learned. You could still have all the students that you taught. There's still a wonderful family. But I'm going to remove the ability to walk. I should be upset about that. I'm happy. Right? So that's the idea is that we have to be able to look and focus on all the positive things in our life. And this is also regarding our relationships with other people. People who are close to us, people who our family members, our friends, they all do so much for us. And yes, there are some challenges and there are some problems that we're going to have with people, and we can choose to focus on that, and we can choose to complain about it, and we can choose to get angry over it. Or we can choose to focus on all the good, and all the happiness, and all the good things that we have, and what we have to feel gratitude and appreciation for. So, during the... Where it is? Yes, so 2,000 years ago, during the time of Emperor Hadrian, so Hadrian had a brother-in-law known as, Cloinicus. And Cloinicus had a son who was named Onkelos. Right? Onkelos was brought up, given the best Roman education. He studied everything the Romans had to offer, including religion. And he was always thirsting to learn for more. And he began to study many different, he began to study many different religions. And eventually he encountered Judaism. And when he studied it, he was very interested, and he realized that his life, his royal life, his life of wealth, pleasure, enjoyment, honor, was not the real thing, right? And quietly, in secret, he began to serve Hashem, and he began to study Torah. But he wanted the opportunity to study it in the open. But of course, it was illegal to convert to Judaism in those days. It was illegal to study Torah during those days. And he had to come up with a way to do it. So he approached his uncle, the emperor, and he said to him, for many, many years I've been studying, I've read so many books, and I've learned so many sciences and so many different languages. But I've been in my room the whole time. I've been in Rome the whole time. I haven't traveled. I haven't seen the world. I want to go out into the world. I want to do some business. Right? Now, I'm not very familiar in worldly things, but I know that you, the emperor, you're such a wise and knowledgeable person. Maybe you can give me some advice. Some business advice. So the emperor Hadrian says, of course. He says, I'll tell you, what you have to do is you have to go around in your travels, and you have to find merchandise that it's very, very valuable. It has great inherent value, but people don't recognize its value. You have to purchase that merchandise at a very low price, and you have to wait till people start to realize the true value of the merchandise you have. And then you're going to become very wealthy. Oh, great, wonderful advice. Thank you so much, uncle. Right? His uncle's offered to give him lots of money to go into business, as much money as he wants. So Onkelos left the palace, and he left Rome, and he traveled to Yerushalayim. Once there, he converted to the to Jewish religion, even though Jews were being persecuted there, and he became a student of Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Shimon ben Hanania, and he spent his whole time studying Torah, and it was very difficult because at that time Torah was really only in Hebrew. There was no good translation of the Torah, and Hebrew was a bit of a new language for him. He was a very good, he was a very good student, and he was able to learn it very quickly, but it was a bit challenging. And but he dedicated himself to it. He studied all day and night until he became a great Torah scholar. And he decided he wanted to help out other people who were in the same situation that he was. He knew that there were many Jews from Bavel, who came up from Babylon after the Babylonian exile, and they spoke Babylonian. right? They spoke Aramaic, which was the common language in those areas at the time. And they weren't very well versed in Hebrew. And now there had been an earlier translation of the Torah. I think Ezra the Sefer had made one, but it seems like it had been lost over the years. And Onkelos decided to write a new translation on the Torah, translating the Torah into Aramaic, based on the tradition that he had learned, that was passed down throughout the generations. And this is the translation that we find in every single Chumash, right next to the Chumash, Targum Onkelos. Now, in the meantime, years had gone by, and the emperor hadn't seen his nephew for many years. And one day, somebody came to the emperor and said, "We heard that your nephew just published a new book. Really great. Well, which science? Which topic? Which language? Science? Math? History? What is it on?" He said, "Oh, it's on the Torah." Torah? What? My nephew? It's terrible. He immediately calls a group of soldiers. And he said, "I want you to go to the land of Israel, and I want you to arrest my nephew, Onkelos, and bring him back to Rome in chains." So the Roman soldiers marched off to the land of Israel. They came to Onkelos' house. Onkelos happily opened the door for them. "What are you here for?" "Oh, we're here to arrest you." "Okay, well, first come into my house a little bit. You've traveled such a long, you've been on such a long trip. Can I offer you something to eat? Sit down over here." You served them a nice meal. And he started talking to them. And he said, you guys know why you're arresting me?" He said, "Yeah, of course. You've converted to the Jewish religion." So he said, "Do you know anything about the Jewish religion?" He said, "No, not really." He said, "Not really." He said, "Let me tell you a little bit about it." He said, "Torah we got from Hashem," and he started explaining to them about the history of the Jewish people, the Torah that we have. And the soldiers were like, "This is pretty interesting. Maybe we'll stay here a few days, learn a little more before we go back to Rome." And before you knew it, these soldiers had converted to Judaism as well. Right? So Hadrian was furious when he heard this. He calls another group of soldiers and he says, "You guys got to go to Israel. You got to find my nephew Onkelos. Got to arrest him, bring him back to Rome in chains." And he's a very tricky guy, my nephew. He's very, very smart. He's going to try to trick you. He's going to start talking to you about Torah and mitzvahs. Don't listen to him. Tell him, just walk in. Don't sit down, eat with him. Just go in, arrest him, and bring him back here. No lengthy conversations with him. Right? Okay? So the second group of soldiers travel to Onkelos. They come to Onkelos' house once again. Onkelos welcomes him into his home with a big smile on his face. "Can I serve you some food? Let's have a conversation. Right? Tell me a little bit about your trip." And they're like, "Sorry, the emperor forbade us to have any discussions with you. And, we must obey the royal command." Right? So he says, "Okay, if the emperor said no long discussions. But the emperor didn't say, but would you mind if I asked you, a quick question?" "Okay, one question. Fine, sure. What's your question?" So he says. So they say, in the Roman imperial court. So whenever the royal officer travels at night, they have somebody who travels in front of him carrying a torch, so you can see where they can see where they're going. And usually, if you have usually a common soldier who carries the torch in front of the captain, right? But when the general is traveling, you have a more important officer. Maybe a captain will travel in front of the general, carry the torch before him. And when the emperor himself travels, you have a really important person traveling in front of him, right? So maybe the general will carry the torch in front of the emperor. But I wanted to ask you, who does the emperor carry the torch in front of? The emperor? He doesn't carry the torch in front of anybody. He's the greatest. He's, the top. Right? So he says, "Well, our emperor carried the torch in front of us. What are you talking about? Who's your emperor?" He says, "Our king, Hashem. Do you know that when the Jewish people traveled through the desert for 40 years, Hashem carried a pillar of fire. He led in front of it, led the Jewish people with a pillar of cloud during the day, a pillar of fire at night." It's like, really? Your God, your king? Instead of you worshiping him, he's serving you. What? Why? So he says, "Because he loves us." "Really? He loves you? Tell us more about this. We want to know." So Uncle sat them down, he started learning, he started going through the history, and before long the second group of soldiers had converted as well. Okay?
So we have Uncle living over here in our show.
Who?
I don't know who, but they have mass conversion.
Okay. Good. So the emperor hears what happened, and now he's really, really angry. So he gathers together his top soldiers, his personal
Special forces,
personal security force, and he says, "I have a very important mission for you, and very strict rules for this mission. I want you to travel to the land of Israel, and I want you to arrest my nephew Uncle and bring him back to Rome in chains, but no talking with him. When you come into his house, you take some sort of cloth, stuff it into his mouth, close it up, no talking." Not one word, no long discussions, not even one question. Okay, fine. So the high level troops travel to
the green. What's it called? The green berets. The green berets.
Okay, right. There was a name in Rome for the Imperial Guard. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
the Navy SEALs.
Navy SEALs, right?
So
they arrived and they're ready to carry out their order without delay. They walk into Uncle house. Uncle opens the door. Oh, welcome! Right? They close his mouth. Not one word. Okay? They put chains on Uncle and they start leading him out the door. And suddenly Uncle stops at the door. And they're like, "No, we're going." And Uncle's like, He starts like picking up his hands. It's very hard for him to lift his hands. They're in chains. And he starts picking up his hands. And on the side of the doorway, he touches and he kisses the mezuzah. And they're looking at him and like, "Well, what are you doing?" He's like, right? And like, "Well, what's going on?" And he's like, Okay, so they remove the gag from his mouth. And they say, "Well, no questions, no discussions, just tell us what's going on over here."
Don't talk to us.
So Uncle says, the Roman emperor, you guys have a very important job. Your job is to surround the royal palace and protect the king, right? A very honorable job, right? And there are obviously different levels in the guards. You're the highest, the top security force in the kingdom, and you sit outside the king's room. Further outside, there are lower level soldiers that are further around outside, right? And they're there to guard the king. But what about the king himself? Does he ever stand guard around your house? Crazy? Of course not. Right? Of course not. So Uncle says, "Well, my king stands guard in front of my house." "What are you talking about?" So he says, look over here on the door. You see this mezuzah? This is Hashem protecting our homes. Really? Why would your God, your king, protect your homes? Because he loves us. You want to hear about it? Let's sit down. We can have a little discussion.
We have a holy shiva good on it.
Right? And before long, the third group of soldiers had converted as well, right? When the emperor realized what was going on, he didn't want to lose any more soldiers. He had lost enough soldiers over here. So he sent a message to Unclus. He said, "Please come to Rome. I'm not going to harm you in any way. I just want to talk with you." And Unclus came back and he said to him, "What kind of foolish move are you doing? You could have been, who knows, your royal blood. You could have been an important officer. You could have gotten a really high level job. What are you, joining the Jews? Right? They're the most persecuted people in the kingdom." And Uncle said, "I'm just following your advice." "My advice? I would never give you such terrible advice." He says, "You told me that I should find very valuable merchandise that nobody recognizes its true value." And that's what I did. I found the Torah, I found the mitzvahs, I found the Jewish religion, right? Which is so valuable, but no one recognizes its true value. And this is what the Medrash says. This is the reason why the Jews had to light the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. Why are they lighting the menorah? Right? They light it every night. There's no one in the Beis Hamikdash at night. They would close down. They would close everything down. The kohanim would go outside, and Hashem doesn't really need light. So why are we lighting the candles in the Beis Hamikdash every night? What's the point? So the Medrash gives us an example. There was a blind person traveling on the road, and he didn't know where he was going, so a friend went with him, a friend who was able to see, and the friend led him and showed him where to go. And the blind person was so thankful, he appreciated going with his friend who's leading him and showing him where to go, taking care of him. Finally, they finish their journey. They come to town at night, and they come home. And as they're entering the house, the person who's able to see turns to his blind friend, and he says, "It's dark in this house, and I can't really see. Perhaps you can light a candle." And he says, "You need me to light the candle? You're even in the dark, you're still probably able to see better than me, right? Why do you need me to light the candle for you?" So he says, "Well, until now, I've had the honor of leading you and showing you the way. I want to give you an opportunity to return the favor, right? To light a candle for me as well." And this is what Hashem was telling the Jewish people. He says, "I lead the way for you. I have a pillar of flame that travels in front of you to guide you and to show you where to go. But I want you, I know how much you long to show your appreciation, to show your gratitude. And I want to give you an opportunity to reciprocate, to return the favor. And therefore I'm going to ask you to light the candle for me. Even though I don't need a candle, right? But I want to give you a chance, an opportunity to show your appreciation." And this is why Aaron was so upset, was so disappointed that the other leaders were able to bring a gift to Hashem. Aaron says Hashem does so much for us. Every day he sends down the man from heaven. He gives us everything we need. He even chose to dwell amongst us, to build a Mishkan. And all the 12 leaders of the tribes come and they have a chance to show their appreciation. They bring gifts to Hashem. But Aaron's left out. He says, "I also want an opportunity to show my appreciation." And that's when Hashem says, "You have an even greater opportunity than them. Not only could you bring a gift to show your appreciation, I'm going to give you an opportunity to reciprocate, to give back, to light a candle for me as well." And this is why this was the ultimate comfort. This was the avodah that was singled out as the chance for Aaron to show his appreciation for Hashem. And this is really the message of this parsha, right? We all have to realize how much Hashem does for us and how much we need appreciation. And just to conclude with the final story, amazing story. I've been trying to verify the story. I haven't actually been able to find the letter, and the details might be exaggerated. But even if not every part of the story is true, the message behind it is certainly a true and beautiful message. So, a young father in Bnei Brak, had a beautiful family, 7 children, and spent his time learning and teaching Torah. He had a wonderful life. Everything was good. Everything was going well for him. But he had one problem. What was his problem? He lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Now, a 2-bedroom apartment in Miami is, how many feet is a 2-bedroom? How many square feet is the average 2-bedroom apartment? 1,200. 1,200. In Bnei Brak, a 2-bedroom apartment is more like 500 square feet, probably. Right? Bedrooms in Bnei Brak aren't that big. And he had a family, 7 kids, 9 people in the house, and it's very, very difficult, right? So it's, and you know, when they had their first child, obviously it was a great thing. That 2-bedroom apartment was a big deal in Bnei Brak for a small family. But as the family got bigger and bigger, it became more difficult. By the time he had 7 kids, it was unbearable. There was no room to move around the house. And his wife was driving crazy to find a bigger apartment. And he looked, but it was very hard, even harder than here, right? Bnei Brak really can't find apartments, right? They're nothing affordable, right? And he's trying to figure out what to do, and he decided to write a letter to the Rebbe. Now, he himself wasn't a Lubavitcher Chassid, but he had gone to the Rebbe many years earlier when he was in yeshiva. He had gone to the Rebbe, and he figured he could write a letter to the Rebbe. Maybe the Rebbe can give him a bracha, right? So he writes the letter, and he's writing how terrible everything is, and he describes to the Rebbe his whole life story. He says, when we had our first child, it was amazing. A 2-bedroom house. We had a bedroom for our son. We had a second son. We got a bunk bed, right? Then when the third son came, we had a little bit of a problem. So we got a trundle bed. We had to, right? Then when the 4th son came, it was a big problem because the 2 bunk beds are very hard to fit in a room. So we had to move out the closet and squeeze 2 small bunk beds into the room. And that was fine. But then we had a 5th child. What are we going to do now? The baby sleeping in our room. But finally, they got a little older. We had to squeeze 2 kids in one bed, and then we started fighting who's going to squeeze, who's not going to squeeze, pushing each other in the middle of the night. Then we got a 6th kid. This is really terrible. Finally, a 7th. It's terrible. It's crazy, right? You can't live like this. You need a bigger house. So the Rebbe reads through this letter, And he writes back like this. He's like, first of all, it's so nice to hear from you after so many years, right? And I'm so excited to hear the news that you found a good shidduch and you got married, right? Amazing, wonderful. I want to give my brachas for your wedding. Mamish, it's such an amazing shidduch you found from a good family. All the good milas, amazing. Afterwards, I heard the news that you had a son. Right? Not everybody has children right away. You had a son within a year after you got married. You got to thank Hashem, right? A healthy son. Then I heard you had a second son. Wow. Second child, right? Amazing. We have such gratitude to Hashem. I'm so happy for you. I want to bless you. They should have lots of nachas from your children. Then you told me you had a third child. Wow. A fourth child. A fifth child. I want to give you blessings and mamish, so much thanks to Hashem for giving you such a wonderful family, right? Your children are all good children. They give you a lot of nachas. It's amazing. A fifth son, a sixth son, 7 children. Amazing. Then you went ahead and you told me that you had a 2-bedroom apartment in Nebra at an affordable price. That's pretty hard to find, right? Hashem is so nice. He's so many gifts He's given you. And we have so much to thank Him for. And regarding the last point that you said you're looking for a bigger apartment, I'm sure if you thank Hashem for everything He's done for you until now, Hashem will continue and help you find what you need for it. So this is really the message we all have to take, right? We all have things that we can focus on, challenges that we can focus on to complain about, right? We can get mun from heaven, but we can focus on the fact that it doesn't taste like melons and cucumbers and onions and garlic or whatever, right?
It doesn't feel it.
Doesn't feel like it. Doesn't look the right way. It looks white and it's not the right color. Right? Whatever we have, we can focus. We can always find something negative to focus on. But we can also choose to focus on all the positive and all the good in our lives. And that will bring us the greatest blessings. L'chaim, l'chaim.